was born into a wealthy Brazilian family. He raced in 161 Grand Prix over 10 years.
He was fantastically fast, fantastically good and tough.
And he took 65 pole positions, winning a massive 41 of them.
Incredibly determined and skillful driver, and really an extraordinary driver, and an extraordinary person.
Charismatic, single-minded and totally focused. This man was the idol for millions of Formula One fans.
Senna was gifted. One of the greatest drivers of his time, I think.
With uncompromising concentration and sheer daring, Senna produced astonishing performances, taking the championship again and again, making him the youngest man to ever win 3 world titles. And to so many fans and colleagues, he is remembered as one of the greatest Formula One champions of all time.
He gave us his total commitment and we gave him ours. He loved his motor racing and he shared this passion with every one of our employees here at Didcot.
Ayrton Senna grew up in Sao Paulo, Brazil. At school, he excelled in gymnastics, art and chemistry, but found mathematics, physics and English a little too difficult. The son of a wealthy Brazilian landowner, he developed an interest in motor racing at an early age and entered the Brazilian karting competition at the age of 13. By 1977, he had won the South American Kart Championship. He then contested the Karting World Championship on several occasions, finishing second in 1979 and 1980. In 1981, he moved to England with his wife Lillian and began racing single-seaters in Europe, winning the British Formula Ford 1600 Championship. And he was soon champion in the 1982 British and European Formula Ford 2000 series.
Speaking personally about racing drivers, I've always admired drivers who are upfront about what they do and just give 101% all of the time they're in a racing car. We've been fortunate enough to have several like that.
With convincing F3 wins under his belt, Ayrton Senna had attracted the attention of F1 teams, Williams, McLaren, Brabham and Toleman, all of whom he tested for. Fellow Brazilian Nelson Piquet opposed him joining Brabham, and of the remaining 3, only Toleman offered him a race seat for 1984. The Toleman team had been founded by businessman and motorsport enthusiast Ted Toleman in the 1970s. With the introduction of Senna to the team, the Toleman result sheet was to record their best achievements ever. Although Lotus had the 2 fastest test times after 5 punishing days in heatwave conditions in Rio de Janeiro, it was Ayrton Senna of Brazil who most had their eyes on as he showed impressive performance in his debut as Formula One driver, finishing 7th in his Toleman heart. In the second round of the year, the South African Grand Prix, Senna scored his first World Championship point, coming across the line in 6th place. 2 weeks later, his performance in the 1984 Monaco Grand Prix brought him further attention. From 13th on the grid, he made fast progress through the rain-soaked streets of Monte Carlo. By lap 19, he had passed Niki Lauda for 2nd place, and then began to catch race leader Alain Prost. To the disappointment of the crowd who could see a grand fight unfolding, the race was stopped on lap 31 for safety reasons. Senna went on to take 2 more podiums that year, 3rd at the British and Portuguese Grand Prix. By the time the Italian Grand Prix had rolled around, Senna made a decision to move to a more competitive team and signed with Lotus for the 1985 season. As he was still legally bound to them, Toleman suspended him from the Italian GP and his place was taken by Stefan Johansson. Under the guidance and enthusiasm of Colin Chapman, Lotus sports cars progressed through the motor racing formulae of the 1950s. In the 60s, Chapman's Lotus revolutionised the premier motorsport, Formula One. Their small, lightweight, mid-engine vehicles gave away much in terms of power, but superior handling meant their competing cars often beat the all-conquering front-engine Ferraris and Maseratis.
They had Jimmy Clark to start with, who was one of the greatest ever, and he, together with Colin Chapman, were a wonderful team, and they went to Indianapolis and they won, world championships and goodness knows what else. Then, of course, Emerson Fittipaldi and the Mario Andretti. I mean, a lot of people have been there and done tremendous things with it.
Eventually, Team Lotus came to appear as though they could win whenever they pleased. It was exactly this reputation that no doubt attracted Ayrton Senna to Lotus at the end of '84. As testing began at Imola for the first round in Rio, Senna was out on the track with team partner Italy's Elio De Angelis, putting the new Lotus 97T through its paces. The 97T was designed for the 1985 Formula One season by French engineer Gérard Ducarouge and powered by a 1500cc Renault turbocharged engine. Simple in design, the 97T proved robustly powerful and featured another innovative piece of Lotus design, an early form of aerodynamic barge boards. Even though all eyes for the first race may have been on the new red and white cars of the McLaren team, driven by defending world champion Niki Lauda and Alain Prost, Senna promised to be not far from the action in this his first race for Lotus. Despite qualifying for his first ever pole position, the season opener finished in disappointment when an electrical problem forced the Brazilian to retire. Not to be set back, Senna triumphed at the second round in Portugal, where he notched up his first Grand Prix victory, winning from pole position in heavy rain after Prost in second place span off into a wall. Senna added a second victory, also in the wet, in the Belgian Grand Prix, and wrapped up his first year with Lotus fourth in the World Championship with 38 points and a total of 2 wins, 2 seconds and 2 thirds, despite a year that was plagued by reliability and retirement. During '85, Senna's working relationship with De Angelis had grown sour, with both drivers demanding top driver status, and it may well have been the reason that Lotus was on the lookout for new talent. When the final major testing session took place in the hot, dusty conditions of Rio de Janeiro, it probably came as no surprise that hometown boy Ayrton Senna was the fastest of all the drivers. Driving his new Lotus Renault 98T, Senna was the unofficial track record holder, clocking an impressive lap time of 1 minute 26.39 seconds at the end of a week in which times became progressively faster. Renault had unveiled their new engine technology, which they claimed was the biggest breakthrough for 30 years. The change centred around a new concept in valve return, allowing the engine to turn at much higher revolutions. The new Lotus proved to be more reliable than its forerunner, and the '86 season got underway on a high for Senna, who finished second to Piquet at their home event in Brazil. He then took the World Championship lead for the first time in his career after winning the Spanish GP at Jerez, in which he beat Mansell's Williams Honda by 0.014 seconds, one of the closest finishes in Formula One history. Senna's championship lead did not last long after he suffered several retirements due to mechanical failures. The chase for the title became a fight between Prost's McLaren and the Williams Honda duo for Piquet and Mansell. Senna took his second victory of the year at the United States GP at Detroit and finished the season in fourth place again with 55 points, 8 pole positions and 6 podium finishes. Early in 1987, it was clear that Lotus and Senna were serious about capturing the coming year's World Championship. Lotus now had the same powerful Honda engines as Williams after Renault decided to step out of the sport. With the addition of Senna's new teammate Satoru Nakajima, Lotus had put together a team that was capable as well as technically experienced. The change of engine was a condition imposed on Lotus by the Brazilian champion to keep him in the team, After a slow start, Senna won 2 races in a row, the prestigious Monaco GP, which was to be the first of a record-breaking series of 6 victories at the Principality, and the United States GP at Detroit for the 2nd year in a row, once again taking the World Championship lead. After a spin due to a faulty clutch in the 3rd to last round in Mexico, Senna was out of the championship hunt, leaving Piquet and Mansell to fight it out for the last 2 races. Mansell badly injured his back in a heavy accident while practicing for the 1987 Japanese Grand Prix at Suzuka, effectively handing the 1987 World Championship to Piquet, since he would miss the last 2 races of the year. This meant that Senna still had a chance to finish as runner-up in the standings if he finished at least 3rd in the 2 remaining races in Japan and Australia. He finished 2nd in both events, but at the Australian Grand Prix, post-race scrutineering found the brake ducts of his Lotus Honda to be wider than permitted by the rules, and he was disqualified, bringing his last and most successful season with Lotus to a sour end. After the disqualification, he was classified 3rd in the final standings, with 57 points, 1 pole position and 6 podium finishes, with 4 seconds and 2 thirds. This season marked a turning point in Senna's career, as throughout the year he had built up a deep relationship with Honda, a relationship which would pay big dividends. For Ayrton was heading for McLaren, who had secured Williams' supply of Honda V8 turbo engines for 1988.
Honda for me is a big name. Honda, it's been the past of my friend Ayrton Senna. He used to tell me a lot about Honda.
In 1988, thanks to the relationship he had built up with Honda throughout the 1987 season with Lotus, and with the approval of McLaren's #1 driver and then double world champion Alain Prost, Senna joined the McLaren team. The foundation for a fierce competition between Senna and Prost was laid, culminating in a number of dramatic race incidents between the two. Bruce McLaren had learnt his skills at Cooper. Following Jack Brabham's example, McLaren set up his own team to first build sports cars and then Grand Prix races. This cramped factory in Woking was the genesis of today's massive McLaren empire. The British racing industry progressed in the 1960s for a number of reasons. One was the proliferation of teams in the UK and the influx of Commonwealth drivers and mechanics who were prepared to work all hours of the day and night. As the UK aerospace industry was wound back, talented designers and technicians became available and were drawn to motor racing. After losing the previous 2 constructors' titles to Williams in 1986 and 1987, McLaren was able to convince Honda to switch its backing from Williams, starting in 1988. The McLaren Honda MP44 won an amazing 15 of 16 races that year, and leading all but 27 laps, achieving a staggering and unbeaten record to this date. At the 1988 Portuguese Grand Prix, Prost got away slightly faster than Senna at the start, but the Brazilian dived into the first corner ahead. Prost responded and went to pass Senna at the end of the first lap. Senna swerved to block Prost, forcing the Frenchman nearly to run into the pit wall at 180 miles per hour. Prost kept his foot down and soon edged Senna into the first corner and started pulling away fast. Though Prost was angered at Senna's manoeuvre, the Brazilian got away with a warning from the FIA. The pair won 15 of 16 races in the dominant McLaren MP44 in 1988, with Senna coming out on top, winning his first Formula One World Championship title. For the new world champion and McLaren, 1989 was the first year when naturally aspirated engines were compulsory for the first time since the 1977 season, after the banning of turbocharged units at the end of '88. Honda had built a 3.5 V10 engine, developed throughout the most of the latter half of 1988. When the MP45 was unveiled for a pre-season testing, it was instantly on the pace, as well as reliable, and looked like a car to beat in the new season, which allowed McLaren to take 10 victories during the season, a total of 6 wins for Ayrton Senna and 4 for Prost. This was at a time when the relationship between the two men was at breaking point, so their rivalry pushed the development of the car far ahead of the other teams as they tried to outdo each other. Although Senna had more wins, he also had a string of retirements, many more than Prost, mostly down to engine failures while leading, which cost him vital points. However, Senna and Prost's combined points total meant McLaren easily won a second straight Constructors' Championship. The rivalry between Senna and Prost intensified into battles on the track and a psychological war off it. By October, Alain Prost was confirmed as 1989 World Formula One Motor Racing Champion, when Ayrton Senna's disqualification from the Japanese Grand Prix was confirmed. At Suzuka, a race he had to win to stay in the running for the world title, Senna was involved in an accident with race leader Prost. Senna had attempted an inside pass when Prost turned into the corner and cut him off, with the two McLarens finishing up with their wheels interlocked in a Suzuka chicane escape road. Senna was also fined $100,000 and given a 6-month temporary suspension of his super license for dangerous driving. The severe punishments were announced at a news conference by International Automobile Federation Director Jacques Sarraute. Jean-Marie Balestre, president of the International Motorsports Federation, which control the Formula One circuit, told the same news conference the Brazilian had received his heavy penalties for dangerous driving. Balestre had harsh words too for McLaren manager Ron Dennis, who called a news conference in London to reveal a FISA report which had been presented to the appeal tribunal, calling for heavier penalties on Senna. He accused Dennis of trying to prejudice the appeal by threatening to take the matter to a French civil court if Senna's disqualification was upheld. He said McLaren risked suspension from the World Championship if they pursued the action. In Australia, for the last round, Alain Prost launched an outspoken attack on Senna, claiming the Brazilian was a danger to the other racers because his faith in God made him believe he was indestructible. Not taking the criticism lightly, Senna in a television interview vowed to continue the fight. "It's a question of justice," he said. "What happened in Suzuka and now Paris is totally unfair. It is a totally unacceptable situation." A few weeks later, Alain Prost was test driving his new Ferrari for the first time at the team's circuit in Fiorano, Italy. McLaren had agreed to release Prost early instead of holding him to his contract for the rest of the year. In 1990 and 1991, Senna, now joined at McLaren by Gerhard Berger, won back-to-back titles while being involved in fierce battles with Prost and Nigel Mansell. Eventually, the loss of Honda power and the rise of Renault would bring about the decline of McLaren. By June, the World Formula One manufacturing leaders were testing a new V12 engine at the Silverstone Raceway in the United Kingdom. McLaren hoped that the engine would give them further dominance on the F1 circuit. Later in the year, after a controversial tussle with Prost on the first corner at Suzuka, both drivers were removed from the race, and as a consequence, Senna won the 1990 World Championship. Knowing that the 1991 Formula One season was likely to be the toughest of his career, the reigning world champion was showing signs of tension. At his first test session of the year in Portugal, Senna had criticised the Honda engineers who were developing his McLaren team's new V12 engine for falling behind schedule. His open attack was modified later in the week with appeasing statements from McLaren and Honda, but the words had established a certain standard, showing the high principles Senna had set in his singular pursuit of motor racing glory. Senna's chances of an easy third title had dimmed over the winter due to McLaren Honda's inability to meet his technical requirements, the rapid improvements of rival teams, and a series of changes to the championship scoring system itself. By the middle of the year, despite having a good start to the season with 4 wins, Senna and his Formula One teammate Gerhard Berger both believed that the McLaren cars were uncompetitive against the Williams-Renault team. By July, having not seen the checkered flag for 4 outings, the pair spoke at separate news conferences before Hockenheim. Senna said they would be trying out a new specification Honda V12 engine in preparation for the German Grand Prix. Senna agreed that the Williams cars clearly were ahead on all types of circuit. Senna insisted further that Honda set up their engine development program and demanded more improvements to the car before it was too late. These modifications enabled him to make a late-season push by winning 3 races to secure the 1991 championship. There were some memorable moments, such as at the Spanish Grand Prix when Senna and Mansell went wheel-to-wheel with only centimetres to spare at over 320 kilometres per hour down the main straight, a race that Mansell eventually won. In 1992, Senna's absolute determination to win manifested itself in dismay at McLaren's inability to challenge Williams' all-conquering FW14B car. McLaren's new car for the season had several shortcomings. There was delay in getting the new model running, consequently it debuted in the 4th race of the season. In addition to lacking active suspension, the new car suffered from reliability issues and was unpredictable in fast corners, whilst its Honda V12 engine was no longer the most powerful on the circuit. And while Ferrari's Formula One team unveiled their car for the 1992 season at their test track in Maranello, Italy, the McLaren team were testing at the Silverstone circuit in England. Senna went on to score wins at Monaco, Hungary and Italy that year, but finished a substandard 4th overall in the championship, behind the Mansell-Patrese pair from Williams and Benetton's rising star, Michael Schumacher. A persistent rumour in Formula One was that McLaren would soon lose the support of Japanese engineer maker Honda. McLaren boss Ron Dennis told reporters, "We have a partner in Honda and it could well be that partnership is extended." A day later, to add to a disappointing season for the team and Senna, Honda, whose engines had powered McLaren and Williams to 6 successive Formula One championships, was pulling out of the sport from the end of 1992. Honda president Nobuhiko Kawamoto said that the decision, which had been expected, had not been forced on the company by slumping car sales. "We've decided to suspend Formula One racing activities after this season," Kawamoto told a news conference. "It is just a chance that our decision to pull out of F1 coincided with the business slump. We made our decision based on F1, he added, when asked if the decision was linked to falling sales in domestic and export markets. The Japanese manufacturer said that after an unbroken 10 seasons in the sport, they had achieved their original aims. Kawamoto added, however, that Honda was not turning its back forever on the sport. Honda first became involved in Formula One motor racing in 1964, but dropped out only to return again in 1983. 5 years later, they teamed up with McLaren. When Ayrton Senna met Honda's founder Soichiro Honda, he promised to build the #1 engine. Honda had won the Constructors' title 6 years in a row, while Ayrton Senna had won 3 World Championships. A company spokesman said Honda planned to invest more money in environmental issues. And to top off McLaren's run of bad news, their senior driver, Ayrton Senna, was reported to be considering moving to a new stable. Ron Dennis hoped that he would decide to stay at McLaren.
I totally accept if he feels that he is in a position to win races in a Williams next year over and above driving McLaren. I completely accept it.
As 1992 was drawing to an end, Team McLaren were not only on the lookout for a new engine, but were well aware that their star driver was shopping around for a more competitive drive. What's more, with the introduction of rookie driver Michael Andretti to the team in December, the McLaren team was on the verge of entering 1993 with a complete new lineup. Experts had rated the 30-year-old American IndyCar champion an excellent driver, who might just be able to challenge Senna for speed if the Brazilian decided to stay with McLaren after his miserable 1992 season.
I certainly think he's one of the best, if not the all-time best driver, but that's all a hypothetical question. But he was fantastically fast, fantastically good and tough.
By October, the 3 times world champion was confirmed as the new driver for Williams-Renault Formula One team. The widely expected announcement was made by team boss Frank Williams at a press conference at the Williams team headquarters in Didcot, UK. Williams said he now had the strongest driver pairing in Formula One and was confident for the coming season. He said Senna had signed a 2-year contract but would not discuss financial details.
And I'm really happy and I'm really looking forward to drive for Williams, drive alongside Damon.
The Brazilian, who was not at the press conference, was to replace new world champion Alain Prost, who was set to retire at the end of the season and would join British driver Damon Hill, currently second in the World Championship. Hill told journalists he was relieved to be with the team again for the coming year. Though he had mixed emotions to be racing with Senna, whom he described as fiercely competitive, but regarded it as the ultimate challenge. Senna, who at this stage was winner of 39 Grand Prix and World Championships in 1988, 1990 and 1991, was back where he started, having had his first experience of a Formula One car in 1983 in a Williams Ford on the test track. With 2 rounds of the 93 season yet to run, Senna concluded his McLaren career with wins in both Japan and Australia, finishing 2nd overall in the World Championship. Before the year was over, Senna received a 2-race suspended ban for striking Irish driver Eddie Irvine. International Automobile Federation President Max Mosley announced the ban at a news conference.
Having regard to his very positive attitude and to the fact that there was a high degree of provocation, this sentence is suspended for 6 months.
Senna had punched Jordan driver Irvine in the face after the Japanese Grand Prix at Suzuka, angry at the way the Irishman had hindered him in the latter part of the race. FIA's World Council held a 3-hour hearing in Paris, at which both Senna and Irvine gave evidence.
The World Council felt that Eddie Irvine's attitude, as it emerged from the tape and from the transcript of the conversation in the Jordan motorhome, was provocative and difficult, and that he should have adopted a different attitude, notwithstanding the fact that Senna opened the discussion in a fairly heated way. And the World Council made this very clear to Irvine.
If Senna did not misbehave in the next 6 months, the matter would be over. Williams had won the 2 previous World Championships with vastly superior cars, and Senna was a natural and presumptive pre-season title favourite, with second-year driver Damon Hill intended to play the supporting role.
I'm looking forward. We have quite a few tests planned before the beginning of the race season, and I'm looking forward very much.
Between them, Prost, Senna and Hill had won all but 1 race in 1993. Benetton's Michael Schumacher had won the remaining event. Pre-season testing showed that the Williams car had speed, but it was difficult to drive. The FIA had banned electronic driver aids, such as active suspension, traction control and ABS, to make the sport more human. In February, the Williams car, which was to defend the 1994 Formula One World Championship, was unveiled for the first time at the team's Didcot headquarters. The Williams-Renault FW16 then moved to Silverstone, where Ayrton Senna, the team's new driver, took the wheel for the car's first laps around the British Grand Prix circuit.
rather soft clutch pedal. Like not a clear start, like a sponge. Like if I'm overstretching. You understand?
The FW16 was the latest car from the Williams design team of Patrick Head and Adrian Newley. It had undergone a completely fresh approach, starting in the wind tunnel and continuing through with a mechanical package. Needing to comply with new regulations, it had a narrower chassis than its predecessor, the FW15, with front suspension redesigned to suit passive regulations, and the fuel tank redesigned for fueling. The rear suspension was much lower, which allowed a much lower rear bodywork. This was combined with an anhedral lower wing. The Williams was not a well-handling car at the start of 1994, as observed by other F1 drivers, having been seen to be very loose at the rear. Senna himself had made numerous, though politically careful, comments that the Williams FW16 had some quirks which needed to be ironed out. It was obvious that the F16, after the regulation changes banning active suspension and traction control, exhibited none of the superiority of the FW15C and FW14B cars that had preceded it. The surprise of testing was the Schumacher-Benetton combination, whose car was more nimble than the Williams, although less powerful. The first race of the season was in Brazil, where Senna took pole. In the race, Senna took an early lead, but Schumacher's Benetton was never far behind. Schumacher took the race lead for good after passing Senna in the pits. Senna refused to settle for second. While trying for a win, he pushed too hard and spun the car, stalling it and retiring from the race. The second race was the Pacific Grand Prix at Ada, where Senna again placed the car on pole. However, he was hit from behind in the first corner by Mika Hakkinen, and his race came to a definitive end when a Ferrari driven by Nicola Larini also crashed into his Williams. Hill finished second while Schumacher took victory again. It was Senna's worst start to an F1 season, failing to finish or score points in the first two races, despite taking pole both times. Schumacher was leading Senna in the Drivers' Championship by 20 points. Luca de Montemazzolo is quoted as saying that Senna came to him the Tuesday before the Imola race and praised Ferrari for the battle against electronics in F1. Senna also told Montezemolo that he would like to end his career with Ferrari. At the third race of the season, the San Marino Grand Prix at Imola, Senna declared that this was where his season would start, with 14 races as opposed to 16 in which to win the title. Senna again placed the car on pole, but he was particularly upset by two events. On Friday, during the afternoon qualifying session, Senna's protégé, the then Formula One newcomer Rubens Barrichello, was involved in a serious accident that prevented him from competing in the race. The next day, the Austrian driver Roland Ratzenberger was killed in a practice accident. Senna spent the morning meeting fellow drivers, determined after Ratzenberger's accident to take on a new responsibility to recreate a drivers' safety group, i.e. Grand Prix Drivers Association, to increase safety in Formula One. As the most senior driver, he offered to take the role of leader in this effort. Senna and the other drivers all opted to start the Grand Prix, but the race was interrupted by a huge accident at the start line. A safety car was deployed and the drivers followed it for several laps. On the restart, Senna immediately set a quick pace, with the third quickest lap of the race, followed by Schumacher. As Senna entered the high-speed Tamburello, the car left the track, hitting the concrete retaining wall at around 135 miles per hour. The race was stopped immediately, and the 34-year-old Brazilian was taken by helicopter to the Maggiore Hospital in Bologna. As track officials examined the wreckage of his racing car, they found a furled Austrian flag, a victory flag that he was going to raise in honour of Austrian Roland Ratzenberger, who had died on that track the day before.
Some of the tracks that have been designed in the last 15 to 20 years have been designed, in fact, in my opinion, with far too high cornering speeds. And when a racing car, the dynamics of an accident at those speeds, at excess of 180 to 200 odd miles an hour, are very difficult to control and contain.
Obviously, over the years, drivers have always voiced their concern over certain issues, and I think the points that Ayrton had made to Frank and to other people over the previous weeks and months will be considered very carefully as part of the inquiry as it unfolds over the coming days.
Senna's death shocked the world, and in Brazil, where he is revered by thousands, President Itamar Franco decreed 3 days of mourning for the man who was the country's hero.
Well, we just come from Brazil, and you only have to go to Brazil to realise the meaning of Ayrton Senna to the whole country. That he was a great hero for them, and also an extraordinary personality. And I only had a very short time as his teammate and a short time to get to know him, and I wouldn't say I ever got to know him close enough to really say what he was really like, but incredibly determined and skillful driver, and really an extraordinary driver, and an extraordinary person. It's not, you can't really discuss it here. You need a whole hour.
Senna's death was considered by many of his Brazilian fans to be a national tragedy. An estimated 1 million people lined the streets to give him their salute. Most of Formula One attended Senna's state funeral, notably among them his fierce rival Alain Prost, who was one of the pallbearers.
People just coming here, this is where the team's home is, and there's a lot of people coming in, ringing in and saying, we can't believe it. I think that's really the situation we're in. It's a little bit of helplessness, I suppose. You wish you could do something, but you can't.
One of the greatest drivers of his time, maybe. Of his generation.
Senna was gifted.
He gave us his total commitment, and we gave him ours. He loved his motor racing, and he shared this passion with every one of our employees here at Didcot.
By the loss of probably the greatest racing driver of all time, certainly the greatest of his generation, it gets to the point where it's very difficult to understand what has happened or the effect that is going to have on the whole of motorsport.
A testament to the adulation he inspired among fans worldwide was the scene at the Tokyo headquarters of Honda, where the McLaren cars were typically displayed after each race. Upon his death, so many floral tributes were received that it overwhelmed the large exhibit lobby. This in spite of the fact Senna no longer drove for McLaren, and that McLaren in the preceding seasons did not utilise Honda power. Senna had a special relationship with company founder Soichiro Honda and was beloved in Japan, where he achieved a near mythic status. In his home country of Brazil, the main freeway from the international airport to Sao Paulo and a tunnel along route to the heart of the city is named in his honour. Senna is buried at the Morumbi Cemetery in his hometown of Sao Paulo. For us, he was not just an idol, he was much more than this. You would look at him and you could see that he carried something very strong inside himself. I believe that Ayrton, for us, is still an important symbol. I think his story and his way of being and his values have remained extremely present. It's 10 years since his death. I think it's important to pay homage in order to remember everything he gave us.
This is a celebration and a tribute to someone who is more than a Formula One champion. He was an example of determination, desire, perseverance that made him a winner inside and outside the track.
For the next race at Monaco, the FIA decided to leave empty the first 2 grid positions and painted them with the colours of the Brazilian and the Austrian flag to honour Senna and Ratzenberger. Starkly contrasting to Senna's intense and unyielding will to win on the track, his exploits off it were humane and compassionate. He was renowned for his close relationship with Gerhard Berger, and the two were always playing practical jokes on each other. Senna's career included 3 wins at Imola's Autodromo Enzo e Dino Ferrari in 1988, 1989 and 1991. He first became Formula One world champion in 1988 when he won 8 of the 16 races, a record for one season driving with McLaren. Senna took the championship again in 1990 and 1991, making him the youngest man to win 3 world titles. By the end of his first year, when he had switched from McLaren to Williams, Senna had won 41 Grand Prix from 161 starts. And to many fans and colleagues, he is remembered as one of the greatest Formula One champions of all time.